Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to take a look at another power generator combination. This is from a different company than what I've reviewed from before. I've done some Jackery reviews before. Today I'm looking at what probably is the chief alternative on the market. You've probably seen some advertising from the company Bluetti before, and Bluetti tends to be, I think, probably the chief kind of side-by-side competitor with Jackery products. So I was interested to see how it compared in, ongoing real-world use. And so at this point, I've been using this, which is the EB70S. It is a 800 watt output, 1400 watt peak output power generator. And then also I've been using their PV200 solar panel. And so that is a rated at 200 watt solar panel. And so a little bit different in terms of the specs, both of the panel itself and then also of the unit itself, but roughly similar to the Jackery Explorer 1000 that I've most recently reviewed. So some very quick specifications before we jump in and dive in closer and take a look at it. This unit is just very slightly smaller than the Explorer 1000. It weighs in at 21.4 pounds or right under 10 kilograms. It has dimensions, as you can see, of 32 by 21 and a half by 22.1 centimeters or 12.6 width, 8.5 in terms of depth, and 8.7 inches in total height. And so it gives you just kind of a rough look at size. The battery capacity here is a 716 watt hour. And so as noted, that gives you 800 watts of rated of continuous output and a 1400 watt of surge power. I will note that that is a lower in both metrics compared to the Explorer 1000, which gives you obviously 1000 watts of continuous, but also a higher peak capacity of 2000 watts. However, when it comes to the longevity of the battery, all of the specifications favor the Bluetti, whereas the Jackery is rated at 500 charge cycles. This is rated at 2500 charge cycles. And by the way, when they say those charge cycles, that is retaining up to 80% of original battery capacity. And so this is a unit that can be used for a long time or used very regularly and heavily without degrading battery performance, which might be a very big deal for you. So why don't we dive in and take a look at the ports and specifications here and take a look at what you've actually got in terms of inputs and outputs. So let's do a quick overview of what is available here. We'll start with a quick look at the top of the unit, where you can see that there is an integrated handle that allows you to carry it relatively easily, but there is also a 15-watt wireless charging port. Now, I have found that at least with my phone that it's a little bit less consistent than what I would like, in that I don't know that I am getting as good of a wireless charging as what I've seen in some other situations before. Most of what's going on here is found at the front. On the sides, you do have some heat dissipation, and so some ability to deal with that on either side. As you can see here, everything is made out of a good rugged construction, polycarbonate, engineered plastics that is pretty typical for something like this. So as noted, most of the goodness is right here on the front, and starting with the fact that there is some pros and cons versus the Jackery units that I have used before. Pro being that this has a more modern looking, brighter display that I do like. What I don't like, as you can see here, is that the power remaining battery life is shown just in 5 different marks. And so here this battery life could be anywhere between basically 40% and 60% or 59%, and but without any kind of specifics in between there, whereas the Jackery units show it down to a 100th percentile point. And so I prefer that more direct look at the overall power output. Now I will note that either in the input or the output, you do get a specific number there. It's just in the actual state of charge of the battery itself. Now beyond that, we have a variety, as you can see, a wide variety of different ports available. And so that includes the input that can either be done with wall charger, it can be done with if you're going to power it from within a vehicle or from solar panel, which we'll get to in just a moment. And so that is your input there. It is a 200 watt maximum input. And so you're going to want to pair that accordingly, obviously, if you're dealing with solar panels. Now over in this section we have the various different DC outputs here, and so that includes a couple of power delivery USB-C, USB 3.0, but USB-C style ports, and so obviously a lot of potential power being put out through that. Then we have a couple of standard USB 2.0 ports, and those can either be 5 volts or 3 amps in terms of their output. And then beyond that, we have a couple of 12 volt, 10 amp outputs here that could be, and so these are DC 5521 output ports. Then you have the cigarette lighter type port that can be used, anything that would typically plug into a car type accessory point. Over on the right side, we have the AC output, and so obviously you see we've got a total of 4 different plugs there. These are all sine wave, really clean power output, but you can see that the top 2 are designed to where you can do a 3-prong plug coming out of them. The bottom 2 are just the 2-prong plug that can be used there. Up top, we do have an LCD light that has a couple of different phases, and so it has a low setting, we have a brighter setting, and then we have the flashing emergency type setting if you want that. So one thing that definitely does stand out is that there are both more ports here than the Explorer 1000, and then also a greater, higher capacity when it comes to the power delivery standard, which could be a factor for you in your use. And I will also note that it does charge faster than what the Explorer 1000 does. Yes, it has a smaller rated battery, but that also comes down to, I think, some good efficiency when it comes to the solar panel itself, which let's talk about that. Let's take a look first at setting it up and using the PV200, which is that 200 watt rated panel. So let's talk the solar panel here for a moment. I will note as a potential negative is that this handle is a little bit flimsier than what I would like for what is not a necessarily super light bundle here, considering that this has 4 rather than 2 panels as being a 200 watt panel. And so as a byproduct of that, I've actually already had to repair this handle because it did separate on me. And so a negative there. Now on the sides of this, we have at the back there just a couple of release points that will allow you to open the panel up, and you can see here that there is a large pouch at the back where you have your connections. One thing that is lacking here that Jackery units have is the USB port right on the panel itself to allow you to charge things directly out of that. In this case, what we've got something is really dedicated more for charging the power station itself. So as noted, this is a 4-panel rather than a 2-panel unit, and so as a byproduct, as you can see, it folds out and has quite a bit of width to it, and so it is a little bit unwieldy in the process of setting it up, but it is supported at the back by a total of 3 different adjustable straps. And so by using this, these arms can be adjusted anywhere between 45 and 5 degrees. So there's 3 different positions that allow you to lock in, and so that you can get the maximum angle that you want for getting at the sun. Now once you have set the adjustment on these various supporting arms, you obviously are going to want to direct it as much as you can towards the sun. I like to kind of tuck the unit itself a little bit under the protection of the solar panel, just in case there is a little bit of weather that comes up, that while these things can handle some weather, they're not really designed for heavy downpours. And so I like to zip things away, and then once you connect to that front port, you start to get power. Now today it is what we would call a partly cloudy kind of day, and so far from maximum potential for sunlight, but still I'm getting about right now it's registering at 136 watts of light that is input over the panels. I'm up to 137 now, obviously depending on the intensity of the sun, depending on how much you're going to get. But if you're operating at 100% capacity, you can charge the panel 100% in somewhere around 5 hours, which is really not bad for, a fairly large battery and coming just off of solar panels themselves. Now, while where I live in Canada, you rarely get peak performance when it comes to solar power, just kind of the nature of the beast of where I live. I have seen up to about 170 watts, which represents the highest that I've personally seen of charging off that. I do appreciate that you can get that, and you can get a single 200 watt panel, which can be a little bit more convenient for transporting it, even though it isn't necessarily lightweight. It's about 16 pounds or 7.3 kilograms, but I mean, it's still highly portable. portable in that sense. And so being able to, fold all of that out and get upwards of, potentially 200 watts of power is going to be very useful. I will note also that it does have good efficiency. It is rated at 23.4% efficiency. It may not sound high to you, but for solar panels, that's actually a good rating. And it does help that when you have poor, less than optimal, let's say, weather conditions, which again, I often encounter here, means that you can still get decent performance out of the panel. It is also wired in parallel rather than series, which means that if you're getting even some shading, maybe as the sun is progressing, and so you get some shading across part of the panels, basically because of its being wired in parallel, it means that, say, if 50% of the panel is shaded, the other 50% is still, fully functioning, as opposed to that power level dropping even lower as it would if they were wired in series. So another positive there. So in terms of my actual test of performance, obviously, one of the first thing I do is just use it for practical charging of my small devices. I try to do all of my camera charging at this point, and as often as I can, things like phones or iPads to charge off this, because I kind of like the notion of being able to get all of that from the sun as far as the powering output. And I basically, at this point, I did almost all of my actual charging of the unit itself from the solar panel, because again, I like the idea, and if you have it, why not? And so when it comes to those things, typically with an output average of anywhere between 8 and 15 watts of draw, it's going to take a long, long time before you deplete the battery of this. And so the battery drops very little in charging devices like that. And so that is zero concern. If you're on a camping trip or something where you have, maybe just a power outage and you're just powering small devices, you're going to have zero issues with that. It's going to last for a very long time. I also used it to run our Ninja blender without issue. Now, I did note the very first time I tried to run it that at first it didn't run it, and I thought, well, that's odd. I thought it should be able to run this, but I noted that there was a display on the front that noted that there was a short, and so very interesting. I took a look at that, and after cleaning the contacts, I think there was a little bit of moisture on the plug from the blender. It worked no problem. So I actually appreciated the smart power management and actually giving me a message on there that tell me what was going awry. And so that was also interesting. Then I tried to plug in my very large electric kettle, it's great because it brings water to a boil very quickly, but it also has a very high draw of 1500 watts. And so I actually wasn't able to successfully run it with the Jackery 1000 unit either. Even though it could handle the peak draw, it would drop off because the overall draw continued to be too high. In this case, however, rather than attempting and failing, it just smartly said that it was circuit overload, trying to draw too much power. It didn't try to run it at all. So that, I think, is going to be useful for those that might fear running a appliance or some device that you think might charge the unit. If it detects, before it tries to attempt running the unit, if it knows that it's beyond its capacity, it won't even try. So I think that that's smart. Then I went to my travel kettle, which is a smaller, it's about an 800 watt unit, and I ran it without any kind of issue at all. And I saw that on average, it was drawing somewhere around 790-ish watts. And so it ran that without any problem. I was able to go to complete boil, able to use it. And so again, functionally, that's something that I have done in power outages. I'm a tea drinker. I like having my tea. And so being able to run something like that, if camping or if, and again, a power outage situation, just one of those little comforts that can bring some joy into situations like that. One final kind of impromptu test that I ended up doing is that last night there was a group of 10 or 11 of us guys that were going to meet up to play basketball. Well, we discovered that the indoor gym we were going to actually was closed, and we didn't have any, late minute plan B, and so I invited people back to play just in our driveway. And so I grabbed the EB70S, took it outside, plugged in spotlights. The spotlight that I'm using to light the set was one of them right now, and it's a 150 watt LED spotlight from Godox. And so I was able to run those lights for hours, giving us enough illumination to play our game, and with very little really overall depleting of the battery. So again, just another nice little single use that I was able to run. I could have run an extension cord, yes, and plugged into the house, but I thought, you know what? This is actually simpler because I can take the power to where I need to be, and that's exactly what I did, and it worked just fine. So my biggest complaint after having used the unit itself is that I would like the top-mounted wireless output to run just a little bit better, a little bit more efficiency for charging. But I think the biggest thing that I and others, as I looked at user reviews, complain about is actually the state of charge display on the front. And universally, everyone would like it to be a percentage as opposed to being just kind of a broad spectrum. So that's one area of improvement I think Bluetti could certainly engage. And ironically, a lot of their other units, either more expensive, but even less expensive, do have a percentage, display. So I don't know why that is the case here. But what I think the biggest complaint I have about that, other than being a little bit uncertain of where you're at, is that in some situations it seems like the things are drawing more battery power than what they actually are, because it drops like this huge zone rather than dropping, partial of it. And so, certainly an area of improvement there. Finally, let's talk about price. The price in the US is $569 for the EB70S, and the PV200 runs right under $500 for that. It doesn't seem like you can package them as or they sell them as a kit, though certainly they are looking to package them. I also do want to say that when it comes to these, I was curious, maybe you are as well, these solar panels will work in conjunction with other solar panels I have. The MC4 connection port here at the front is a standard connection port, so I was able to use the other panel or this panel to power other branded units and able to use other branded solar panels to charge this unit. So maybe you already have a solar panel and so you can do one or the other. But either way, this is a considerably cheaper price point than the Explorer 1000. And so at the end of the day, if you're kind of debating between the two and you're considering the Bluetti, here's the reasons I think to consider the Bluetti. I think it's a good value because of that price point. It does recharge faster than what the Jackery unit does. And if you value battery longevity, being able to charge it more often or for a longer period of time, it's another reason to consider the Bluetti, because it seems like whatever their battery technology is, it is designed to where it can handle more recharge cycles while retaining good performance. So those are some compelling reasons, I think, to consider the EB70S. It has been a solid unit for me and during my test period, and one that I would have no problem using myself for those kinds of applications. I think it's important to buy for what you need, and this seems to be a good size unit for those that are looking for maybe a camping or overlanding type experience, and that gives you enough power to run small appliances, and then of course to maybe recharge during the day from solar panel, and that makes it very useful and might make your camping experience, well, less like roughing it. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, you can find linkage to purchase or to get more information. There's also linkage to follow myself or Craig on social media, to become a patron, to get channel merchandise, and of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.